And welcome back to Good Day Northern Michigan. American Wolf, from Nazi refugee to American spy, is a heart-stopping true story full of last-minute rescues, near-death encounters, and survival against untold odds. It is also the story of coming of age, family dysfunction, and national identity, and is a resounding testament to the triumph of the human spirit.
Using the notes compiled by her father, author and Dr. Audrey Birnbaum vividly retells the account of Wolf's childhood in Berlin, his escape from Nazi Germany, and the continued challenges he faced even after he reached freedom. Here with us to discuss her book, Dr. Audrey Birnbaum is joining us on Good Day. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So take us through this book and how the process really started for you. Obviously, it started right there in the home, I'm sure.
It did. It really goes back to 2018, just as we were laying my father to rest, when we found almost 350 pages of notes that had been hidden away that contained meticulous details describing his harrowing escape from Nazi Germany in 1941, his dangerous and daring immigration to the U.S., and his extraordinary return to Germany as a U.S. intelligence officer in the height of the Cold War. So when we found this, we were just completely gobsmacked, and I just knew at some point I was going to have to tell this story and share it with the world. It was such a, kind of edge of your seat story, really just captivating. So I just had to leave my day job in order to sit down and do it. So it took a few years.
Well, could you tell us a little bit about what that process was like? You found this amazing raw material that had this story that needed to be shared with the world. What was it like to start sifting through all that raw material and formulating this story that would end up being this book?
Yeah, it was challenging in a way because the material was there and all the details were there, but in some ways my father had written it without that much emotional content. I mean, it was emotional for me to read it because it was his life story, but he didn't imbue it with emotion. So I had to almost, I want to say, become him, because I did write it in the first person in his voice. And so I had to kind of slip into his shoes and kind of feel what it was like to live in the time. And sometimes when I was writing it, I felt like I was communing with him, which was for me very emotional to do. But I think I was able to sort of capture the feeling. And I know people who've read the book now say they feel like they are there in Nazi Germany in the 30s, and they definitely feel the experience of living through it. And they say it's a very emotional book, but also funny. It has a lot of humor in it just because of the family dynamics, which, as I mentioned, were a little bit dysfunctional, which I think adds like a good aspect to the book and makes it entertaining as well as gripping.
Now, I'm curious too, because you said you were kind of shocked to find all these pages of notes from your dad. Did he ever talk about this growing up? How much of this was a surprise to you when you discovered, what he had written down?
Yeah, that's a great question. And my sister and I talk about this a lot because we certainly knew, and we knew he grew up in Germany. We knew he had escaped. When we were young children, he talked about it a lot, but he talked about it as though it was like an adventure story. I mean, again, it was sort of devoid of emotional content, and we didn't know the details, and we didn't know all the losses he had racked up, and we didn't know how many close encounters that he had were really, they almost didn't make it out. I mean, it was rather late in 1941, and the war was already in full play for a couple of years, and there were so many encounters that my grandfather had where he almost had gotten into a concentration camp, so many near misses, and again, so many people who just disappeared from my father's life, one after the other, friends, family members. So I think going through all of that, which we didn't know, and then the difficulty he had once he came here was another real astonishing part, that you think that once you get over to the other side, all will be well, and it was just not the case. The losses continued and the difficulties. So I think those were really the most revealing parts for me, as in addition to the spy part, which was quite exciting.
Well, you mentioned, you talked about you talked about this with your sister, but in the story you say that your dad left Berlin without his sister. Is that right?
Yes, that is true. My aunt's story could be a whole other book, but unfortunately, she's not with us anymore to tell us the details. But I don't want to give away too much in terms of what they had to leave behind. But my father's sister was left behind. She had to take a different route, and there were many challenges to how they had to come, and they had different pathways and contingency plans for how to get out, and different countries they were trying to get to in case the America plan didn't work out, and the plan, she ended up going to a different country, and again, some of this I'd like to not necessarily share with the audience because her story is quite fascinating.
Yeah.
So I will leave it to the reader to find out. But yes, they did not come together. And there was a separation for quite a few years until they were reunited.
What sounds so fascinating about this novel is a lot of times when it's these recountings of this time period, a lot of it will focus on the spying, the getting out of Germany, but you include all these family dynamics that make this person not only a hero, but a real individual that is so rare and refreshing. What made you want to include the family aspects of this? Because I feel like it is going to play into our understanding in how that voice in our head when we're reading a novel, it's going to shift that voice in our head.
Yeah, I think this is in a way what was missing from when I read my father's book. Of course, he didn't include that at all because, he lived through it, but I don't think he really necessarily saw his story with an adult perspective. He kind of was stuck, I believe, in his own history. When I was hearing your last segment, I kept thinking that my father could have used Boom, the therapy dog, but he didn't really he didn't go for therapy. I don't think that, he lived in that era where that was so common, but I think he, in a way, really had like PTSD from his experience. Mm-hmm. I was thinking this morning about that the dysfunction of his family actually helped them get out. His mother was very hard and driven and a perfectionist, but she persevered against a U.S. that actually was trying to prevent immigration in many ways. His father was a bit of a character and very spontaneous and very funny, a bit of a clown, and that got him out of some very sticky situations that maybe kept him from being, taken away. So that dysfunction that made for a very bad marriage and a crazy family actually was to their benefit in getting out. It did not help them that much when they came here, though. I think then they could have used more stability and maybe more family support. But I felt that dysfunction helped also define my father very much and maybe my relationship to him. And I felt that somehow it needed to be included. It humanized him a lot. And it also just made the story, as you said, so universal and relatable, so that it's a Holocaust story and a World War II story, so people who are interested in that will relate to it, but anybody who likes a human drama and a riveting and emotional story would be able to relate to this at any time.
Well, that's fascinating. When was the publishing date for this book? How long has it been out?
Oh, I think 2 days. It launched on Monday.
Fresh novel coming out.
It's very fresh.
Well, good. Hot off the presses. Where can folks check it out online or in a bookstore? How do we find it?
Yeah, so you can go to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and it should be out in Walmart as well. And you can order it through any independent bookseller. And so far, it's been getting great reviews. So I really, truly hope that everybody enjoys this personal story.
Oh, that's great. Well, we thank you so much for sharing the book with us, for sharing your dad's story. Mm-hmm. Really appreciate you giving us the time here on Good Day Northern Michigan.
And if people want to just know more and also see some great historical footage, my website is www.audreybirnbaumauthor.com, and I welcome you to visit my site. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And we'll make sure all the links you need They're all going to be available on 9and10news.com after the show. Thank you so much for joining us, and you have
Thank
a good
you
day.
again. Thank you.